Hello everyone. This is a video overview showing how to use the STC databases to conduct the formal research for the upcoming research paper. Before we get started, I want to show you some highly valuable but probably very underused resources that are available to you. I'm in the Blackboard course shell before we click into a class or anything, and I want to direct your attention to the assist button on the left hand side. And you've probably already seen this where you've kind of got a quick link to the CLE and a lot of other valuable resources. But if you scroll down to the bottom, you've got a quick link to the library, and we'll take a look at that in here in just a moment. But we also have library research help available at the Pecan Library in McAllen. And this is a feature where you can make an appointment with a librarian to get one-on-one help with your research paper. And when you do this, typically, I'm going to go ahead and click on this. There is a sign-up process, and you're given 3 choices here, and all of these are good, but I will say Patricia and Lori are especially good, and so I recommend, maybe choosing them. I like Rick too, but Patricia and Lori will probably put in some preparatory work ahead of time to help. I know I talked to Patricia at one point, and she said that when students, and I don't know if this is just particular to her, but she said when students make an appointment, you fill out the form and everything, and they try to prepare ahead of time so that the time is used best. So like here's the calendar. Obviously spring break is coming up and that's out of the question, but like let's say if you were making an appointment this week, let's say if I wanted to make one on Wednesday and I wanted to choose 5:30 p.m. I'm assuming this one would be online. I don't know, but I know that students who are on campus can make a physical in-person appointment. So I'm going to click continue. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. And let's see. So this is where I could upload the assignment file. This is where I could describe the assignment, and I think what I would do if I were going to do this, I would also really target what it was that I was looking for. I wouldn't just say I'm writing a research paper on the subject of happiness. I would already have my working thesis in place. I would already have an idea of things that I wanted to look up, keywords and things like that. And if I do that, then I think the librarian would be a lot more likely to potentially have some things lined up. So for instance, I'm going to use an example here in a minute that would illustrate this. But like, let's say if I wanted to write a paper that makes a claim that happiness is a choice. I'm getting this idea from the Quest for Happiness article, because there's a place in there that says that traditionally and historically a lot of the cultures have believed that happiness is kind of completely out of our hands and it's up to the fates and the gods and the kings and things like that. But maybe I want to argue that there's a fair amount of element of choice and control in manifesting or achieving our happiness. Maybe that's my basic idea. I already have a list of key terms of things I think I need to look up, so maybe I might tell them, got to write a research paper on the subject of happiness. I would upload the assignment file so they could see what the instructions are, and the value of that is on the assignment sheet. I have the restrictions of what kinds of things can be used. So I have on there TED Talks, and I have how many sources you have to have from the STC databases and so on. So if I do that and really target what I'm asking for, and maybe I'm going to ask them to help me look up some things on maybe developing a growth mindset, and also cognitive reframing, being able to look at things from a different standpoint. So I'm going to give some key terms and do some things here so that I can really sort of put them to work for me. And then I would go ahead and confirm the appointment and so on. And so this says the location is Pecan Library Research Help. So I do think this is going to be in person for those who are interested. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close out of that because I'm not going to make an appointment. But I wanted to direct your attention to that. And one other thing, there is a librarian chat that's available 24/7. Now, our librarians are not on duty 24/7, but somebody is. So we're part of this group or organization that provides this to college library patrons, and it's 24/7 chat, and it's really awesome, and it's kind of like having your own personal library assistant. And these are real librarians that have real research skills, and so if you can't find something, they can. You're going to be a lot better off though if you come in prepared. You don't really want to click on this. You can. It's not going to hurt anything, and they will try to help you. If you're like, oh, I got to write a research paper on subject to happiness, I don't know what I'm doing, and or I don't know what I want to write about, and so on. But if you really need to already have, before you come to the library part of the databases, you really need to have your working thesis in place. So I already have one, like happiness is a choice, or happiness is largely in our control, something along those lines. And it's also good if you have an idea of keywords, topics, things like that that you need to help find on. And if you also have some preferences about the source types. Now, I don't know about you, but if I'm a college student in a class, I'm probably not going to want books. Not that the books aren't going to be really good, but they're long, and I'm not really going to have time to read whole books. Unless I was given this at the start of the semester and maybe the paper's due at the end of the semester, then maybe I can read a book or two along the way. And it is possible to use a chapter in a book. So if you do find something that's one chapter in a book, that's fine. But in general, you should be choosing things that are articles, and you should be choosing articles that you understand and articles that are a reasonable length. You don't want something too short. You don't want something too long. So avoid articles in general, that are a page, or it depends. Sometimes you can find a 2 or 3 page article that's good, but you want something that has some substance to it that you can get some mileage out of. And you also want a mix of source types. So a mix of journal articles, which those are going to be kind of more involved and maybe a little bit more difficult to process. And then in this particular class, I'm also okay if you have some well-regarded magazine articles, like from The Atlantic, from Psychology Today. We also have in the library the Journal of Happiness Studies. So I'll be showing you some very specific fishing holes, so to speak, to look in to make your part easier. But it's always good to, while you're searching, why not put a librarian to work? And they're not going to work offline while you're working. It's going to happen during the chat, and you can come back to it again and again. So like, let's say if they find you 1 or 2 sources, you can do that and then go and find some things, and then if you want some help on something else, you can come back, and so on. So imagine if you have a librarian find you 2 or 3 things, well, then you've only got to find maybe 4 things on your own. So it's kind of like having a research assistant. So I'm going to go ahead and start this right here just to show you how it works. And we're just going to wait just a second for a librarian to connect. Now, usually when you're doing this during business hours, it's going to be one of our people here at STC. If you're doing this after hours, then you'll connect to a librarian somewhere else in the world, and they will help you. And then it's just a chat feature here. And but I do want to wait for it to come up because I want you to see. I could submit my question here. It says, we apologize for the delay. I really do want to show you the live feed though. So I may go ahead and, okay, so somebody has joined the chat. So now I'm going to ask for some help. Okay, so Here I'm in the chat and I'm typing in a question. In this case, I'm asking for help in finding a very specific article that I had before. I remember the name of it. I remember where I got it from, but I'm having difficulty finding it. So I'm asking them to help me find that. I've got to type in my question and then give them a bit of time to find it, and it's a back and forth feature. This is really a great feature, and I didn't want to just show in the video, here's the library in chat, I think you should use it. I wanted to give a brief demonstration and remind you that it's 24/7. So you can look for some stuff, but then you can also ask a librarian to help you find some things also, all from the comfort of your own home. So the first result that they gave me was the web article for that. Remember, when you do the preliminary research, you can find a lot of things that are in the databases, but it won't be the version that's the print version with the page numbers. And so that's what I told it. I said, yes, that's the correct article, but I need the one with the page numbers from the STC databases. So they're like, got it. And they're going to go back in and look for that. I do already know that they find it, and so here's where we are, and I have to log in, and I'm navigating to that article based on the link that they gave me. So this was much quicker than me spending a lot of time trying to find that. I'm going to close that. But it's a really good resource there. Okay, so now we're back in just the library discovery search. But before I actually show you this, I want to show a few other things that kind of tie back to some of the things that you've seen in a previous video. Remember that it's really important that you've done the preliminary research on the internet, because that will make your life so much easier when you're on the STC databases. I showed you a number of places that you could look, and Google Scholar is one of those. And if I were to click on that, it comes up with the search bar here. And I just want to illustrate, if I were to type in something like happiness and mindset, especially if I maybe want to look up something about growth mindset and developing that, it comes up fairly quickly with a whole bunch of articles. And notice that this is from the Journal of Positive Psychology. That's going to be in the STC databases. The great thing about Google Scholar is that it's going to look for things that are scholarly, but they have a presence on the internet too. So obviously I would, do some scrolling, calling those articles up, reading the abstracts to look if they looked promising and things like that. But just a reminder, if you do good pre-research or preliminary research, you'll find things not only that can give you ideas, but you can ultimately also find things that you would find in the STC databases. So highly recommend using those same strategies. Remember, in that previous video, we also looked at JSTOR articles that have a presence on the regular internet. A lot easier to find things on the internet. They've recently updated the library interface, and it may look better than the old one, I don't know, but it's kind of clunky and it's not very intuitive, and it's like finding a needle in a haystack, and there can be an element of frustration to it. But I'm going to try to remove that for you with some very specific strategies, and one of those is making sure you're doing your homework, so to speak, in terms of doing your pre-research. Lots of good things there, and some of the things that you find in that pre-research could, these are things that you could definitely use. So some of the pre-research can actually end up being killing two birds with one stone. And this is an example of an article that I found on JSTOR fairly quickly and easily. And notice the question there, can happiness be taught? That question right there is a great research question, because whether the answer is yes or no, I already know for a fact that's going to be debatable. If somebody argues that happiness can be taught, then that implies that it's a skill, that it's something that you can learn, that it's not just an emotion or a feeling. It's not just getting what you want in life or having things go your way. It's showing some element of control to it. So even if even if I stick with my working thesis that I've started with for this video, that happiness is a choice, or that a great deal of our happiness lies in our hands, despite the fact that, we also don't have control over all things in our life. This is a potential something that I might look at, and it's only 8 pages. That's good because it's not too long and it's not too short. And I know a JSTOR article in general is probably going to be fairly easy to process, at least for this particular topic. But I want to show where I got, maybe part of the original inspiration for the working thesis statement, making a case about happiness being a choice, or that happiness doesn't lie entirely out of our hands. So when you read something, and this is part of the reason, or really the main reason why we did those hypothesis assignments, there are so many different ideas and so many crazy claims in there that, and not crazy because they're unreasonable, but crazy just because they're kind of contentious and easy to have an opinion about. And this is one that virtually all traditional cultures believe that our happiness is ultimately out of our hands. And that's kind of a depressing thought, sort of, if you think, that it's completely out of our hands and it's just a matter of luck or fate or whatnot. But it may not even be depressing, because maybe happiness isn't even something we should be pursuing. Maybe it's not even a worthwhile goal at all. So there's just so many possibilities of what you could come up with in terms of, inspiration for a working thesis. So I just wanted to remind you that these ideas don't come out of thin air. Usually they're going to come from your pre-writing, or they're going to come from something you've read and your response to that. I also want to bounce back to the idea of using TED Talks for ideas. So this is another one, and I've seen so many TED Talks that it's not even funny, and I get lots of ideas. So there's lots of things I'm going to click on today that I may not necessarily use as a source, but it's a source of inspiration and it's a source of ideas. In this particular TED video, Sean Achor, who is a psychologist, he makes a lot of really interesting arguments. But, number one, he says our happiness, our idea of happiness and success is broken and backwards. He says that we often think that if we work hard now, to achieve success, we'll be happy later. And he argues that if you work to make sure that you're happy in the moment, that you're happy now, you'll be more successful. So he says we kind of have things backwards. And he's a big proponent of, developing a positive mindset to bring that about, and he would argue that there are intentional activities that we can do to do that. But one of the things that he showed at the very end of his TED Talk was a PowerPoint slide, and had something like this on it. And he made a claim in his TED Talk that said, oh, if you tell me about your life, he said, I can predict, your long-term happiness. And he made this claim that your life circumstances only make up about 10% of your long-term happiness. And when I heard that, I thought, well, that's crazy. How can you quantify that? How can you say it's 10%? How do you measure that? And what do you even mean by that? So, and at the bottom of his slide, I could see like this. I saw a name, Lubomirsky et al. 2005. So I saw where he was getting that from. And so I did find that. And there's this research that was kind of the standard for maybe about 15 years, and it's come to be known as, the happiness pie model. And what it boils down to is these researchers claim that 10% of our long-term happiness comes from circumstances, that 50% of it comes from genetics, that we all have a genetic predisposition, and some people are going to be more predisposed than others to have a mindset or a happiness set point that is positive, but we all fall on some kind of spectrum. So this is largely out of our control. Circumstances are out of our control. But she argues that, about 40%, which is not insignificant, of our happiness lies in our own control and falls under the umbrella of intentional activity. Well, I liked this idea. I like the idea of control. And I've read some studies on twins that were raised apart and, things like that. So I read this studies on this and so on. I thought this was crazy because, stuff happens in life and it has a pretty significant impact on your happiness, no matter how you define it. But he also qualified it and said long-term happiness. And so really wanted to read more about that. And over the years and in the last couple of years, this whole model has come into question. So just because you read something in a journal article doesn't mean it's a fact. Somebody can come back and ultimately challenge that. And so here is an article. Go ahead, there we go. That challenges that pi model and calls it into question. And let me see if I've got, where's the other one? Nope, that's not it. Let me see what I did with that. Okay, this is it. So we had one article from the databases that challenged it, and then we've got Lubomirsky's kind of rebuttal and revision of that. And so she revisits her pie chart and makes some concessions and claims and says that the criticisms that were levied against her original argument have merit, and so she's modified that. So all of this is going to be useful because I really do I like this kind of core idea, even if the percentages are flawed. And her new research suggests that, we still have a fair amount of control. So there's some things that I can do. And in the paper, I can reference the original source, the criticism, and say, but hey, this still holds some merit and makes some qualifications there. So you see, as I'm starting to do this, I've got a very specific idea. I'm finding things. Now, of course, I've streamlined things here so that the video isn't too long, and so it's easier for me to show you things. But I'm showing you that you don't just go into the databases and type in happiness. Now, you can do that to kind of see what happens, but you really need to go in with specific ideas of what you look for. Just like when you go to the grocery store, you don't just go in for food, and you don't just get your basket and start wandering around and putting random food items in your basket. You think about what you're going to make for dinner, and you go get the specific items that you need to make the dinner. It's a whole lot easier that way than coming back with random groceries and trying to figure out what you're going to make from that after the fact. So it's the same principle here. Now, I also get ideas from TED Talks about things I need to look up, and some of the things that I find in TED Talks, I may just want to use the TED Talks themselves for part of it. This is one of those examples. So if I'm going to argue that happiness is a choice, I know that people are going to kind of take issue with that. And they're going to say, well, a lot of things in life happen that we have no choice over. We get sick, bad things happen to us, and they're horrible and traumatic. There's nothing good to be said about them, and they can be devastating. And I don't dispute that, but I know that I've got to counter that. And I certainly don't want to say that, all the bad stuff that happens to people can somehow have a silver lining. I would never want to say that. There are some things that are crippling, debilitating, emotionally, psychologically. There are some things that people just don't bounce back from. But let's say if I believe in the general resiliency of people and the general idea that you can extract things from even traumatic or difficult experiences. This is one of my favorite TED Talks. It's called How the Worst Moments in Our Lives Make Us Who We Are. You can kind of tell what it's about just based on the title there. And so I've got some good examples from here that I could potentially use, but I'm also getting ideas of keywords, concepts, and people that I can look up in the paper. I got another idea from this TED Talk, which I probably wouldn't necessarily use in the paper, but I got a lot of ideas of what I could look up. This one is by a video game designer who suffered a traumatic brain injury, and it kind of took her out of commission for more than a year. She had to stop working. She couldn't do any reading. She couldn't do anything really but kind of lie on the couch. And she was in pain. She had mental fog. And it was a really scary time in her life. And she was suffering so terribly, not only physically, but she was really suffering mentally more so than anything else, and was very reluctant to, really ask her husband or even her sister for any kind of help on this. And she was so consumed with the mental aspect of the suffering not to mention the physical. She was kind of afraid that she was never going to get better, and she actually started to begin thinking about suicide. And so she started thinking about, what she could do to kind of get her out of that. She did a lot of research, and a lot of that research she shares in this video, and she talks about post-traumatic growth. And this was probably the first time that I had ever heard of that, even though I had heard of and believed in the concept of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So I guess I had kind of heard about it in a way, but I hadn't heard like the flip side of post-traumatic stress. I didn't know that there was like an official, kind of scientific something that had been studied about how, how you can grow from really difficult, terrible circumstances. I mean, it doesn't just happen overnight. There are things you can do to help build and manifest that. She talks about all kinds of things that I could look up. She talks about ways to build different kinds of resilience. She talks about the regrets of the dying and how the things that you can do to build resilience are like the opposite of that, and how, and you're also getting kind of some insight on the benefits of post-traumatic stress. So, I mean, not post-traumatic stress, post-traumatic growth. So when I get these key terms to look up, notice that not all the things that you look up in the databases are going to be about happiness. They're going to be about things that are related to it. And no matter how you define happiness, you probably do need to at least think about things like resilience, because lots of bad things happen in our lives. Even if you have a relatively smooth life overall, everybody's life is going to be punctuated with death, sickness, all kinds of things, maybe losing a job, or just struggle. To be human is to struggle. So I got lots of ideas of things that I could look up here. Here's another TED video that I really love called The Habits of Happiness. Matthew Ricard is a Buddhist monk. He's the French translator for the Dalai Lama, and really interesting life. He's got a PhD in something like molecular biology, but when he was 28, he gave all that up to become a monk. And he still, does or keeps up with the scientific research, and he's got a deeper definition of happiness. But at the core of that, he's a big proponent of training your mind. He says that we spend all this time, a lot of people spend all this time working on their body, but he said, we don't really spend that same amount of time, effort, and intentionality on training the mind. So I know I want to tap into ideas like this, training the mind, developing a growth mindset, which is, kind of developing that some resiliency and a can-do attitude when you're faced with either adversity or even challenges, like when you're in school or when you're faced with really hard, challenging problems to solve. And I have other TED videos and sources and things like that that speak to these things. So I want to remind you that in your paper, you can have up to 3 TED Talks. I highly recommend exploring them, if nothing else, for ideas, but they're also really good for putting concrete, specific examples in your paper that will resonate with your readers. I think the hard part is going to be, choosing which 3 you're going to use. And you can have more than 7 sources, by the way, but 4 of them have to be print sources, 4 of them have to be from the STC databases. The other 3 can be from TED if you want. And I highly recommend, because the TED Talks are easier to process. Not only do you have the videos, but you can have the transcripts that you can, go back and read and process, and they're a lot easier to process than, say, journal articles and things like that. But I get a lot of ideas from them. And let's see. Okay, that one I had already showed. Here are some other ones that I also am getting ideas about. I like the notion of, possibly treating the idea of success in the paper, because a lot of people in society, I think, equate success with happiness. But what does that mean? Is that just financial success? We know from the upside of feeling down, which is one of the articles that we read about, is there's a claim toward the end, or maybe toward the middle of the article, where it says that that people's success in life, whether that's romantically, financially, all these things, that it's tied to, what kind of resources and power you have in society. So, but I think these two videos present a kinder, gentler, different kind of success that I think is more sustainable and maybe a little bit more healthy. So I'm going to get ideas from these. This is actually one of my favorite TED videos here. This is from former basketball coach John Wooten, who used to coach, I believe it was UCLA, back when Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was on the team, and he's no longer with us, but he's got this great. And I believe he used to be an English teacher a long time ago. He is so well spoken. He speaks 90 miles an hour and can quote people off the top of his head. It's really powerful. It's called The Difference Between Winning and Succeeding. And it's really good. So if I'm going to say that happiness is a choice, maybe I'm going to have some kind of treatment of, what our thoughts are about the relationship between success and happiness. Now, of course, I don't have a fully baked plan yet. When you're doing research, you're just kind of trying to figure out. It's kind of like if you're going to cook dinner, you kind of have an idea of what ingredients you need to get, but if you're going to kind of put some new spin on something, you're doing some thinking and brainstorming, and you're like, oh, okay, I've used this kind of ingredient before, and this one's kind of similar. It's giving me some ideas. All of these things are giving me ideas of things that I can look up. All of these things are mentioning people, concepts, things like that I can go and look up in the STC databases. Now, one of the things I'm going to show you, and if I bounce back over here just to the general library thing, I can put search terms here in the discovery search, and it searches a whole bunch of databases at once. And that's kind of neat in a way, because you're searching in you're searching in an ocean. You're not searching in all of the databases. We probably have, like, I don't know, let's click in here to see. We got 141 databases. The discovery search does not search all of those, but it does search, a good chunk of them. But when you do that, you're going to have so many thousands and thousands of results. You're going to have to use strategies to narrow that. So ideally, you would want to be typing very specific things in the search bar and not just happiness. Or you want to fish in a smaller smaller fishing spot, so to speak. So you can also look in very specific databases. So instead of looking at a bunch, you can look at specific databases. You can also look at specific journals. So I'm going to start with this one first, because if you're looking at a specific journal, that's a smaller area. Let's say, for instance, this one from Psychology Today. This is, it's written in, really easy to understand language. I really like using this kind of stuff in papers for this class. And I know for a fact that we have Psychology Today in the databases. So let me go back to where we were. There we go. Psychology Today. So right now, what I've done in the databases, I've clicked on Journal Locator and I typed in Psychology Today. And now I'm just wanting to search in Psychology Today. So to do that, I've got to go here, and I've got to choose one of these databases to, find that in. And so let's see which one, because I think I used, I don't remember which one I used. Okay, so oops, my session is about to expire. So in this one, I had done a search in Psychology Today, and I found an article called The Hidden Side of Happiness here, and it comes up in a little reader. I can download it. I've got more suggested sources over here that I can draw from, so I really like that feature. I can also come over here and search other things within this by using the subject terms and so on. can download the PDF. I can click here to cite it, copy the URL, and so on. I highly recommend that for the sources that you find, that you download them, save them to a folder, even if you're not fully reading them initially. Before you actually choose them, though, you will have to read them. There are some things that you can do to help pre-process them. If they have an abstract, you can look at that to kind of see. And you can also use AI to help process and interact with the text to kind of see how viable it is for various things. But before you definitely choose it, you have to read the whole thing, make sure you understand it, and see for yourself if it's really a keeper. But you can do some things while you're vetting a source, and you can do some things while you're reading it for the first time or reading it after you've read it through once to kind of see how useful it will be. So I highly recommend looking in very specific journals. The Psychology Today, I highly recommend. A lot of the things you find in your preliminary research, you can find a lot of these articles on the web, but we want the ones that have page numbers. And so these have page numbers. These are the official print ones. So you could go on the internet and find this one as a regular article. So that's why it's useful to, open a search bar and go Psychology Today and then look for stuff that you want on the happiness paper, because you're going to be able to find it in the STC databases, and there's a lot of stuff there, a lot of psychological research on that. You can do the same thing for the Atlantic Monthly, which is the same magazine that we got the Garber article out of, and you can find stuff on happiness in there. And here is one that I found by Arthur Brooks from the Atlantic. He writes a lot of stuff on that, and this is called The Satisfaction Trap. And, like the other ones, this is probably, I don't know, 8 pages, 10 pages, something like that. And so you can do that with a lot of different sources. So I do think I have a couple of others okay, The Economist is another one that you can look for. So you're not limited to the ones that I'm showing you, but so far I've showed you Psychology Today, The Atlantic, The Economist, and how you can find things there. I really, really love the ProQuest database thing because of the neat little research features that it does. And let's see, I think I thought I had an article pulled up here. Let me see if I can find. Okay, here we go. Now, I didn't type anything super specific in here. I just typed in happiness. Keep in mind that generally it's better to, have what you're specifically looking for. But here's one: how much happiness does money buy? So you can see that, okay, maybe I can find something from The Economist on that if you're writing about that. I can use different keywords here to bring up other things. And notice how it's only bringing up articles from The Economist. Now, we don't want all of our articles from The Economist or from The Atlantic or from Psychology Today, but they're really good sources to use for a class like this one. And and you're fishing in a smaller fishing hole. You can also find journal articles we have something called the Journal of Happiness Studies. So that is a good place to look. And these aren't the only places. And this doesn't mean that you can't just look in a database and so on. But these are very targeted. They're smaller fishing holes, so to speak. And you're likely to, meet with some success there. So let me show you a couple of other things before we wrap this video up. Okay, so I'm still in the ProQuest database, and what I did was I went over here and I clicked on the menu bar and clicked on basic search and then chose publication search because I knew I wanted to find, the see if the Happiness Journal was in here. And let's see. And I have the Journal of Happiness Study. I'm going to search for that. It may or may not be in here. Okay, so I do see it. And I could find this also if I bounce back over here to Journal Locator. I could click on this. And so if you know a particular journal or a magazine or something that you want to see, hey, do we have that here? You can type it here and you'll find out whether we have it, and then you can do a search there. A couple of other places I like to use: Time Magazine. It's well regarded too. They have a lot of stuff on happiness there, or they have in the past. You might be able to find something there as well. Now, having said that, you do need to have, at least a couple of, journal articles. You want to have a balance of source types. You don't want to have all magazines. You don't necessarily want to have all journal articles. Although in a college setting, you're going to have a lot of classes where they only allow or they only want journal articles. Since we're in an English class, we have a little bit more leeway, just because it's the kind of things that we write about and the nature of our papers. If you're in a health sciences class or something, well, then you're not going to be allowed to use magazines and things like that. You're going to have to use all actual articles that are, from a medical journal or things like that. But so you get the idea, though, in terms of what you can look for. One other thing I want to show, and I'm not advocating that you do this, but I used to, before the pandemic, I used to have a happiness reader. And this is the latest one. It's $20 in the ebook version, and they have a lot of articles on different subjects that are there. That's the second edition. And I think I had up here, yes, this one. This one is the first edition. It's out of print now, but there are some places that you could find it for $6 or whatever. If anybody's interested, probably not. You can find everything you need and more on the STC databases, but I just thought I would throw that out there because there are some really great articles in both of these. In many cases, there are some articles that are the same to both of them. This was the first one, and but some of the best ones it had in here they took out of this one, but they also kept some of the really good ones. But that's kind of it in a nutshell. Coming in and having a strategy and keywords and things that you want to look for to be able to find what you need. And it's really important that you don't just use the keywords from your topic itself. So if I took the idea of happiness as a choice, I can't just use that in my searches. I need to think about, what kind of things are within our control, what kind of things are not in our control. I need to think about, what are people going to disagree with, because I have to not only support my thesis in the paper, but I have to defend it. It is an argument. And so that means that your thesis has to be something that is open to discussion and debate. It's not just about, oh, here's my thesis and let me state my positive reasons and evidence for support. You have to anticipate what the criticisms, the questions, the challenges, the concerns will be about the claims that you make. And you'll have to kind of think about these things somewhat while you're researching. That will emerge more when you're processing your articles after you've chosen them and creating your outline. And even at that stage, you may discover that, man, I'm missing something. Just like when you're cooking dinner, you think you had everything in the house, in your pantry or whatever, and you're in the middle of something and you're like, oh no, I don't have basil, and that's crucial to the lasagna that I'm making. And so somebody's got to go to the store and go get that, or it's just not going to be the same. Something's going to be missing, or you might end up discovering that you bought the wrong thing that you needed. It's like, oh no, I bought 2% milk for this recipe, but I really needed whole milk. And so you've got to put one, I guess you can't take the milk back, but you get the idea. You've got to maybe reject that one for what you're doing and go get whatever it is that you need. So I hope this was helpful. Believe it or not, I really streamlined this to make it shorter, because when you click into the databases and you're waiting for things to load, it takes a while. And there can be a frustration factor if you just go into the databases and just type in something into the discovery search. and do that. I will say one last thing though before I wrap this up. If we go back to, or if I can find, which I'm not seeing right here, so let me open another tab and go to the STC library page, STC library, and click on that. So I showed quite a bit of emphasis on, kind of fishing in a specific journal or magazine. In terms of databases, a couple that you can focus on, because it's kind of overwhelming if you have 141, and it can even be overwhelming if you're using Discovery Search. Academic Search Complete is a really great place to look. JSTOR is a great place to look, but I recommend when you're looking for JSTOR articles, start on the regular web because you can probably find what you need there. I do prefer that you cite those from, the STC databases, and many of the things that you find on the web for JSTOR articles will prompt you. Some of those are open access, but some of them will prompt you to sign into the STC databases. And so if it's in the STC databases, I prefer that those are cited from there. But the ones that are on the web for JSTOR are okay because they're the real deal. And then of course, the ProQuest Central is really great, but you can stumble on that through other means, like by looking for a specific journal. Those are really good ones to use. You're also welcome to browse the others. There's lots of good, but I feel like, instead of me giving you 20 choices, those are three good: Academic Search Complete, JSTOR, and ProQuest Central. Good places to look. All right, so that's it. That's a wrap. I hope this was useful, and if you have any questions or you need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out. Y'all have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon.